Hello everyone, welcome to Options with Doug, streaming live on Monday and Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Bookmap Discord and the Bookmap YouTube channel. Hello everyone, welcome to Options with Doug. Before I get started, I need to go through the disclosures. General disclosure, all Bookmap limited materials, information, and presentations are for educational purposes only and should not be considered specific investment advice nor recommendations. Risk disclosure, trading futures, equities, and options involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. Here's my contact information. The best way to get in touch with me is through Discord. My name on Discord is Doug P. Also in Bookmap Discord, there's an Options-Doug chat channel. You can post questions, comments, and content related to the topics of my presentation and the topics of the channel that I'll go through in just a moment. I'm also on X. My name there is @DougPless. I do have an announcement. Next week, there's a special webinar, Bookmap webinar, How Institutions Move Markets with Bruce, Chief Education of Bookmap, and also Scott Piscini. He's a Bookmap streamer as well. So this is on next Wednesday, January 21st, 1 p.m. And note, my webinar will begin a half an hour later on Wednesday at 2 p.m. And also Monday is a market holiday next week. So next week I will be streaming on Wednesday at 2 p.m. and then on Friday at my normal time at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So I believe this special Bookmap webinar may be only on Bookmap Discord. You can check the schedule at bookmap.com for more information. And again, next week I will be streaming on Wednesday at 2 p.m. and on Friday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Here are the key tenets to my approach to trading. I believe that options trades and market maker hedging activity are key drivers of price in many stocks and futures. That certainly applies to the large cap tech stocks like the Magnificent Seven stocks, as well as the equity index futures like the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100. And for the S&P 500, SPX is the underlying index, SPY is the ETF version of that index, and the ES futures contract is a derivative of SPX. And when traders buy and sell puts and calls in SPX and SPY, market makers take the opposite side of the trades and they hedge their delta exposure with the ES futures. And for the NASDAQ 100, NDX is the underlying index, QQQ is the much more liquid ETF version of that index, and the NQ futures contract is a derivative of NDX. And just like the S&P 500, when traders buy and sell puts and calls in NDX and QQQ, market makers take the opposite side of the trades and they hedge their delta exposure with NQ futures. The focus of my presentation today and the focus of the Options-Doug chat channel is options order flow, the impact of options markets on stocks and futures, and the influence of market maker hedging flow on price action. I have a two-step process for trading. The first is planning, and I use positional analysis. I look at how traders and market makers are positioned in the options market and how those positions change from day to day to develop a thesis regarding expected trading range and volatility for the day as well as a directional bias. And the second step in my process is execution. I look at real-time order flow in Bookmap and real-time market maker hedging flow in Spotgamma Hero to confirm my thesis and for setups. And when I talk about setups today, I will be focusing on an underlying asset. Setups in that asset can be taken with futures contracts, shares of stock, or options, depending on the asset as well as the way you like to trade. Questions and comments are welcome, and I will be watching both the Options-Doug chat channel as well as the chat and YouTube for your questions and comments. Please feel free to post. I'll do my best to answer your questions. Here's my agenda for the day, Wednesday, January 14th. First of all, we'll go with news items, economic data, events, and earnings for today as well as the rest of the week. Then I'll go through my positional analysis. Then I'll review some setups from earlier today. Then I'll take a look at the live market. And when I get to live market, if anyone has any stocks they want me to take a look at, please let me know and I'll be glad to do that. All right, let's get started with news items. There were a couple of economic data releases this morning. PPI, Producer Price Index, came out this morning. That was mixed. There's the monthly, yearly, core, non-core. It was mixed, not much of a market reaction. And then retail sales, also at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And retail sales came in greater than expected and also greater than the previous number, but still not much of a market reaction. And then on Friday, this is the January options expiration. So this chart is from the Spotgamma dashboard home screen. It's showing market maker delta notional on the vertical axis by expiration date on the horizontal axis for the S&P 500, NASDAQ, and Russell 2000. Orange bars are showing positive or call delta notional. Blue bars showing negative or put delta notional. So you can see this upcoming expiration is call dominated. And typically that can lead to some consolidation or a move lower after expiration when those calls that are supporting the market, the positive gamma, expires. That may already be going on. So we'll see that in a couple of minutes. All right, so that is the options expiration chart coming up on Friday. All right, let's move on to positional analysis. I'm going to start with the S&P 500. This is the ES Futures and Bookmap. Let me point out a couple of key levels. First of all, here is the SPX 69.45 volatility trigger, or that level until the end of the day acted as support for the S&P 500 SPX, and today acting as a resistance. Next key level, SPX 6900 put wall, and SPX is broken down below that level. And you really can't see it here, but it's dashed blue line, and here is the ES lower daily expected move, and then the ES lower weekly expected move just down below. All right, before I take a closer look at this chart, let's step back. Let's take a look at our higher time frame. I'm going to go to the SPX. This is the underlying index. This is a 1 year, 1 day chart in Thinkorswim showing the April rally from last year. And then the market started to get a little bit more volatile on October 10th with deep pullbacks. And then most recently, the pullbacks have become smaller. That trend, it looks like it's ending today. All right, so let's take a look at the more recent price action in a 30-day 1 hour chart. So here are the more recent pullbacks that I was talking about, getting smaller and smaller, and it looks like that trend is ended now. And this uptrend looks like SPX may be breaking that as well. All right, let's take a look at the levels on this chart. I'm going to start with the expected moves. Dashed purple lines are showing the lower and upper weekly expected move. This is based on the options market, based on the closing price for SPX from last Friday. Those levels remain in place for the entire week. So it looks like the SPX lower weekly expected move so far is acting as support. Then the dashed blue lines are showing the lower and upper daily expected move, also based on the options market, based on the closing price for SPX from yesterday, and SPX is trading well down below the lower daily expected move. Hello, Stephen. Welcome. Glad you're here. All right, those are the expected moves. Again, lower weekly expected move appears to be acting as support. And note I do post the expected moves every day for SPX, ES, and NQ in the Options Dash chat channel in Discord, Bookmap Discord. All right, let's take a look at the spot gamma levels on this chart. These are based on gamma-weighted open interest. They're provided to Spotgamma subscribers, and they're available on a variety of trading platforms. So here's the put wall that I mentioned before at 6,900. That's a strike with the largest net negative gamma. Should act as support. Not doing its job today. Next level up above is the volatility trigger at 69.45. That is Spotgamma's proprietary volatility and gamma flip level. Below that level, market makers' position on the gamma curve is negative. In a negative gamma environment, market makers have to trade with price to hedge their delta exposure, and that tends to enhance or increase volatility. Above that level, market makers' position on the gamma curve is positive. In a positive gamma environment, market makers have to trade against price to hedge their delta exposure. That tends to subdue or decrease volatility. And this is based on Spotgamma's older total open interest model. And we'll take a look at the newer model in the trace gamma heat map in just a couple of minutes based on their newer synthetic open interest model, and it kind of turns this on its head. The gamma picture is a little bit different. Then finally, the call wall and absolute gamma strike are at 7,000. The call wall is a strike with large net positive gamma. It can be expected to act as resistance. And the absolute gamma strike is the strike with largest absolute positive and negative gamma. So that's where most of the gamma-weighted open interest is concentrated. And note, there were no shifts in levels for SPX. All levels remain in place unchanged from yesterday. And hello, Alex, Stella, welcome, glad you're here. And Alex, you're very welcome. All right, that is SPX in a 30-day 1-hour chart. Again, no changes to the SPX levels. Lower weekly expected move acting as support. Let's take a look at a little bit shorter time frame, wrap up our view of SPX. With a 1-minute chart. Nice downtrend, deep pullbacks for short entries. Down to the lower weekly expected move. Note now the put wall is acting as resistance. And earlier today, SPX did not quite make it down to the put wall in that first move lower. Broke down below the put wall in the second move, third move. Now it's acting as resistance. All right, let's take a quick look at SPY. And we'll go back to SPY. Zoom in. The SPY volatility trigger at 692, around that level, acted as resistance before the cash open. And note, SPY is also trading below its put wall at 690. That's the put wall and the absolute gamma strike. Again, deep pullbacks for shorts. All right, for SPY, the volatility trigger and absolute gamma strike, the levels in play for today, both shifted lower, so a bearish brace for SPY today. All right, so that's the S&P 500. Then back to Bookmap now. All right, so in Bookmap, I have, whoops. So I have SPY levels and SPX levels on this chart, as well as key ES levels. So let's zoom in. So again, key levels. SPX 6945 volatility trigger. And then you can't see the label there, but that is the SPY 690 volatility. Actually, the 692 is up above. That's the SPY 690 absolute gamma strike. Put wall. Again, price is trading below that. And then now trading below the SPX put wall. And then next level down below is the SPX and the ES lower weekly expected moves. I do calculate those differently or separately, independently. All right, so that is the S&P 500, very bearish today. Let's zoom in on this. We'll talk about setups in just a couple of minutes. Let's take a look at NASDAQ now. NASDAQ also very bearish today. NQ trading down below its lower daily expected move and its lower weekly expected move. So unlike the S&P 500, NQ has dropped down below its lower weekly expected move. All right, I know there are a lot of lines on this chart. I have NQ lines, QQQ lines, and the DX lines. So let's isolate the underlying index charts, lines, levels in play. We'll go to QQQ first. Zoom in. All right, so QQQ also finding resistance at its volatility trigger. Oops. At its volatility trigger earlier today. And then now trading down below the 620 absolute gamma strike. All right, so those are the key levels in play. Again, deep pullbacks for short entries. All right, that's QQQ. Let's take a look at NDX, the other underlying index component. Zoom in. All right, levels in play. 25,600, large gamma 3 level, around that level acting as resistance. Next level down, large gamma 4 level at 25,500, around that level acting as resistance. Now it looks like NDX finding some support right around the 25,293 zero gamma level, and just down below that is the 25,200 call wall and absolute gamma strike. And that 25,250 level has been the call wall absolute gamma strike for quite some time. All right, so that's NDX. Back to Bookmap. Again, NQ futures. There's that 25,250 level just down below. All right, NASDAQ again, deep pullbacks on the way down, and now looks like maybe finding some stability. And again, we'll talk about setups in just a couple of minutes. All right, let's wrap up our positional analysis by taking a look at gamma. So let's go to the Spotgamma trace gamma heat map. And this will give us an idea of the potential for volatility and support. So this is the trace gamma heat map in Bookmap. Blue shading is showing positive gamma, red shading showing negative gamma. Remember, in positive gamma, blue shading, we're looking for lower volatility and looking for some support. And then in red shading, we're looking for higher volatility, faster movement, wider range of movement. So this is a little bit different from the total open interest model, which would have negative gamma down below the volatility trigger, which is right here. So you can see there is some negative gamma down below the volatility trigger, but further down below the put wall, there's positive gamma support. And it looks like this 6900 strike has developed as a very large, not a 99 percentile strike, but close, positive GEX. All right, let's zoom in on this just a. So it looks like now SPX is trading just right above the 6900 level. So finding some support around this 6900 level. And trading up and down around the Spotgamma implied one-day move low. And let's step back in time. I'm going to go back toward the open. So the open, right at the open, SPX was in positive gamma, blue shading. And we'll step through time pretty quickly here. So as the day has progressed, negative gamma coming in up above, but the blue shading, positive gamma down below remains. And then I'll watch that 6900 strike starting to build as traders sell puts at that level, market makers buy the puts, hence the positive gamma. And we can see again, S&P 500 finds some stability and trading just above the 6900 level. And my guess is that if that positive gamma wasn't down below, the move down today would have been much larger. All right, so that's the S&P 500. Again, we'll talk about setups in just a couple of minutes. Or that's the gamma heat map. So let's move on to setups now. All right, so the levels that I talked about, these are based on gamma weighted open interest. They're updated once a day. Open interest data comes out sometime overnight. We get the levels and they remain in place for the entire day, although they are changing. And then the trace gamma heat map that we just looked at, that we're looking at now, that's updated every 10 minutes. So this gives us a 10-minute increment view of how market makers are positioned in the SPX. And now we'll move on to real time, move on to execution. And this is the Spotgamma hero indicator. What this is showing is options trades and market maker hedging activity in real time. And this chart is for the S&P 500 index components. We've already taken a look at a couple of those, SPX and SPY. It also includes options trades and market maker hedging activity for ES and XSP. The white line is price for SPX, and the purple line is the hero signal. The direction of the line indicates, or the direction of the hero signal indicates options delta. A falling hero signal indicates traders are taking negative delta options positions. They're buying puts and or selling calls. And then a rising hero signal indicates traders are taking positive delta options positions. They're buying calls and or selling puts. And net for the day, delta notional is negative at minus 3.18 billion, and that is not especially large. All right, so again, we saw from the trace gamma heat map that SPX is finding a support around the 6,900 level in this blue positive gamma zone. So let's take a look. Earlier today, remember I talked about 3 deep pullbacks for short setups, and they're all marked here with the hero peaks. $9.35, right around $10.15, and then $11.30. All good short entries. As traders shift from taking positive delta options positions to negative delta options positions and price reverses lower. So 3 peak patterns lining up with those deeper pullbacks for shorts. There's another signal that we can take a look at for the S&P 500. That is the S&P 500 equity signal. And it is showing traders have been taking negative delta options positions for the entire day. So this is pretty typical. The S&P 500 index signal does a better job of showing the turning points. It is a little bit more noisy than the S&P 500 equity signal, which tends to show the overall trend, which is down. And again, I'm looking at the hero signal trending down from the open. So this is showing options trades and market maker hedging activity for the S&P 500 equities, all 500 stocks in the S&P 500 index. All right, so let's go to Bookmap now. So we know both hero signals moving down, index signal showing shorts at these deep pullbacks, and this is to VWAP in Bookmap here, VWAP for ES. Let me clean this up. All right, so again, shorts at VWAP with those peak patterns in the hero signal. This last one was a little bit more clear. The volume dots in Bookmap show market buy minus sell. Green volume dots indicate more buyers than sellers. Magenta dots, more sellers than buyers. And you can clearly see here in this last pullback, aggressive sellers at the top, and price drops lower. All right, the subchart here shows some pretty interesting information. First of all, this first move lower, iceberg orders show that large traders were fading that move. They were buying ES with iceberg orders they used to hide their size, and then they pretty quickly took their foot off the gas just after 10. Yellow line shows stop orders. So sell stop orders help to fuel that move lower. And earlier, cumulative volume delta was pretty flat, and you can see the aggressive buyers starting to come in, setting up this last pullback at 11:30. Interesting that for the day, cumulative volume delta is positive, and that starts since the open yesterday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, so that's the S&P 500. Whether you trade ES, SPX options, SPY shares, all 3 good short entries with the pullbacks to VWAP. All right, let's take a look at NASDAQ. Again, 3 deep pullbacks, short entries. Note NASDAQ did not quite make it to VWAP in the second pullback and came quite short of VWAP in the third pullback, 1130. NASDAQ a little bit weaker than the S&P 500 today, but still now finding support. Also in the subchart, all three lines have been moving lower until just before noon when cumulative volume delta has ticked up. So in contrast to the S&P 500 ES, large traders are selling with iceberg orders, sell stop orders shown by the yellow line, fueling the move lower, and cumulative volume delta is still negative for the day, but has turned higher just before noon. So let's see what options traders are doing. Go to NASDAQ. So this is the NASDAQ index signal showing options trades and market maker hedging activity for the NASDAQ index components. We've taken a look at those. That is QQQ and NDX. Again, 3 deep pullbacks for shorts. In this case, the NASDAQ signal set up a nice divergent short as NDX there was making almost equal highs where the NQ or the NASDAQ hero signal was making lower highs, setting up that nice short at 1015, 1020. And the last short at 1130. Right now, again, looks like stabilizing just above the 25,250 level that I talked about before. That's the call wall of the absolute gamma strike. All right, there's another signal that we can take a look at for NASDAQ. That's the MAG 7 signal. This is showing options trades and market maker hedging activity for the stocks known as the Magnificent Seven: Apple, Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, NVDA, and Tesla. And just like the S&P 500, the signal today is showing the overall trend, which is down, and then the NASDAQ index signal is a little bit more noisy, helping to pinpoint the turning points a little bit more clearly. Let's just compare the MAG 7 signal with the S&P 500 equity signal, which is the MAG 7 plus 493. So we're looking at 2.26 billion negative delta notional for MAG 7, and a little bit more, minus 2.81 billion delta notional for the S&P 500 equity. So the majority of this is MAG 7 signal, MAG 7 stocks, that negative delta notional. And hello, Marge. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing. Can you look at NVIDIA? Sure, yeah, and NVIDIA is on my list when I get to stocks in just a minute. Let's take a look at one other thing. So we'll go back to the S&P 500 index signal. Now I'm showing puts and calls in one combined signal. This is the total signal, and I'm showing all trades, all expirations. Let's see what portion of this is options that expire today. That's shown with a teal line. So it's showing next expiry, and for the S&P 500, this is options that expire today. So this is interesting that just around half, just a little bit over half of this is 0 TDE, and indicating that the other half is options that expire after today. That could be to tomorrow, end of the week, next month, next year. So this is, I interpret this as a little bit bearish when traders are taking longer term negative delta notional trades. We can separate out puts and calls. So the blue line, dark blue line, is puts that are further out. That's all trades. And the light blue line there is puts that expire today. Let's just go back to all trades now. So we can see that call buyers definitely driving price today. The put buyers driving price for the S&P 500. All right, any questions about the indexes? All right, 3 short entries, and now SPX finding some stability in this blue positive gamma down around 6,900 and down below. All right, let's take a look at some stocks now. And I picked out several stocks that I wanted to take a look at. If anyone else has any stocks they want me to take a look at, like Marge, please let me know. I'll be glad to do that. I want to start with Meta. Meta, this is a bearish opening drive, bearish momentum with both the blue line and orange line are moving the same direction. That is a momentum signal, both moving down, showing traders are buying puts and selling calls, and Meta setting up a nice short. And the short entry was right after the open. Remember, the first short entry for the indexes was 935. Same for Meta right here. And this is a nice divergent short. So from the open, traders were selling calls, buying puts. Meta price reversed higher, looks like right around 628, and then reversed lower. So setting up a nice divergent short. Note the flow alert came in just after the open, signaling significant options activity. Get your attention, setting up this nice short. If you were fast right at the open. So let's go take a look at Bookmap. Let's go to Meta. Let's zoom in on this. All right, bearish opening print, shown by the large magenta volume dot. There's that deep pullback, divergent short. Remember, the hero lines were moving down, price moved up, setting up a nice short there. And Meta reverses lower. And there's the 10:15 pullback to VWAP. 11:30 pullback to VWAP, setting up shorts. One more short right around 950. As the hero signals continue to move lower. And the primary target looks like has been reached. So targets, high liquidity in the heat map. These are showing limit buy orders in the order book. The heat map shows a history of the limit orders in the order book. So at 6:20, there were limit buy orders before the cash opened. Some more came in after the cash opened. Looks like they were absorbed. And then more buyers at 6:18. Those orders were absorbed. Price reversed higher. Came back, absorbed more orders at 6:18. Then finally down to 6:15. These orders came in right at the cash open, limit buy orders. It looks like so far they have not all been consumed. And these high liquidity levels do act as magnets for price. So nice pullbacks to high liquidity, pullback to VWAP, back down to high liquidity, VWAP, high liquidity again, then finally down to 6:15. Though it looks like options traders really driving price today, you can see all the green volume dots and rising cumulative volume delta. There's some buyers buying shares of Meta, but it looks like the options traders are overwhelming so far. They were earlier today. All right, next stock, Meta, Microsoft. Very similar setup to Meta. And Microsoft weakness continues. Let's go to Hero. Another divergent short, not quite as clear as Meta. 935. Price moves up into call sellers and put buyers. Full alert and price averse is lower. And mainly call sellers driving price in Microsoft today. So divergent short and bearish opening drive, again, primarily driven by call sellers. Back to Bookmap. $10.15, $11.30, $9.35. Liquidity targets in the heat map. And primary target at 460. Limit buy orders in the order book. Looks like they were consumed. Then on down to 458, absorption to that level. Let's go take a look at Hero, see if some dip buyers are coming in. Maybe call buyers, put sellers. Let's see. No, not really the case. So it looks like some traders buying shares. Cumulative volume delta starting to tick up just a little bit. Some large green volume dots. All right, that's Microsoft. Next stock, NVDA. Here you go, Marge. So far, sticking with the Mag 7 stocks. NVIDIA, another bearish opening drive, bearish momentum. NVIDIA finding support at the 181 level. All right, let's see what options traders are doing. Go to NVIDIA. Zoom in on this. All right, NVIDIA finding resistance at the 184 hedge wall. 180 put wall, key gamma strike down below. And traders really started selling calls right around 935. Buying puts. And that vertical line, that looks like a large institutional block order, buying puts in NVIDIA. All right, so the call line and put line are both flattened out now, and we saw NVIDIA chopping around, has been since before 11 a.m., right around 11 a.m., let's say. And again, a lot of green volume dots, rising cumulative volume delta, aggressive buyers coming in as the put buyers and call sellers have taken the foot off the gas. So about a half an hour for a bearish opening drive in NVIDIA and a break below the 184 hedge wall. Let's just see what the liquidity looks like at the 180 level. So price does move lower. Breaks down below 181, that would be the next target down below. All right, next stock I wanted to take a look at is Broadcom. Another bearish opening drive. Finally finding support at 335. Let's see what options traders are doing in Broadcom. Another divergent short right at 935 at the 350 key gamma strike, down to the 340 hedge wall, and then as we saw, Broadcom is traded down to 335. So traders selling calls from the open, setting up again a nice divergent short as price moved up into a level that acted as resistance, the 350 key gamma strike. Traders continue to sell calls. Price dropped lower. Let's go back to Bookmap. Let's zoom in on this. See if Broadcom actually, it doesn't look like it actually touched the 350 level. Yeah, it did. Maybe. Maybe just short of 350. So absorption at that level, reversal at VWAP. And a lot of angry sellers there, a lot of magenta volume dots. As price dropped lower down to the liquidity targets at 340, 335. All right, so far for today, it looks like there's a double bottom at 335, and both times at the touches of those levels, the limit buy orders in the order book, and those buy orders were filled. Note this reversal here. Cumulative volume delta started to rise, and then price finally reversed higher. You can see all the green volume dots coming in. Then price finally reversed higher. Back to Hero. And the put buyers and call sellers have now taken the foot off the gas as some aggressive buyers come in and buy Broadcom shares. And CW Group wants to check AMD. Sure. Yeah, we can do that. Kind of interesting day in AMD today. Last time I checked, it was actually positive on the day. One other stock I want to take a look at before that is MicroStrategy or Strategy, bucking the trend, at least earlier today, as Bitcoin has gotten a bid now. MicroStrategy and Marge asked, was there head and shoulders for NVIDIA? I didn't see that. Are you looking at a longer time frame? Let me know. In the one-day chart, I did not see a head and shoulders, unless you're maybe talking about an inverse head and shoulders. Let's take a look at strategy now. This is a classic pattern, very bullish opening drive. Traders buying calls. Flow alert comes in just after the cash open. Traders aggressively buying calls. This lasted for about 25 minutes. All of a sudden, call buyers were exhausted, start selling a few calls, and price reverses lower. So that fuel that had driven price higher, when traders buy calls, market makers sell the calls, and they have to buy stock, underlying stock, to hedge their delta exposure. So traders buy calls, market makers sell the calls. They have to buy stock to hedge their delta exposure. So classic pattern here, somewhere in between a call peak reversal and call exhaustion, but finally resolving lower. All right, let's go back to Bookmap now. Go to strategy. Bullish opening drive lasted about 25 minutes. Call buyers take the foot off the gas just below 190. Call exhaustion, and then traders start selling calls, and now strategy down near lows of the day. Here's the opening print right here at the point of control due to the high volume at the open. All right. CRW group wanted to look at AMD. Sure, we can do that. I don't know if there was any news that came out about AMD, but it really took off right around 10 a.m. So this might have been news driven. So it was chopping around before and then suddenly took off just after 10 a.m. And there were call buyers that came in at that time. Looks like they were actually chasing. Price moves up first. Call buyers come in a few minutes later. Really doesn't matter. In this case, when traders buy calls, market makers sell the calls, they have to buy stock. Same thing applies. And then call exhaustion, call peak. A few more call buyers come in, or actually aggressive buyers, then call buyers. And now looks like more call exhaustion. So it looks like in this case for AMD that call buyers may be following as price moves higher. All right, back to Bookmap. So you can see on every move higher, all the green volume dots, aggressive buyers driving price higher. Cumulative volume delta moving up, confirming that. So it looks like initially in these moves higher, that aggressive buyers were driving the initial move, and then the call buyers came in a little bit later to help fuel that move higher. All right, anyone have any more stocks they want me to take a look at? I want to go back and check on the indexes. All right, so it looks like now SPX trading up above the 6,900 level. Again, finding support in the positive gamma 6,900 and below. Let's check NASDAQ. Also finding support. All right, let's go back and check Hero. We'll start with the index. So it looks like some call buyers have come in now. Price is moving higher. And a few put sellers. Check the equity signal. Pretty flat. Looks like a few call buyers have come in. Shown by the rising orange line. And Marge says NVIDIA was HD pattern, daily time frame. Okay. Thanks for that, Marge. Let's go back to NVIDIA. All right, so the main thing for NVIDIA today, as far as I'm looking at this one-day trade, was a bearish opening drive, and then put buyers and call sellers took the foot off the gas. Also, the reversal at the 184 hedge wall. Let's check NASDAQ. All right, some put sellers and call buyers have come in now. Mag 7, still pretty flat. S&P 500. Call buyers. Let's check trace. All right, so now it looks like SPX has moved into some slightly negative gamma up above. All right, I want to remind everyone next week I do have a schedule change. First of all, Monday is a market holiday, so I will not be streaming. And then on Wednesday, there's a special webinar at 1 p.m., and then I will come on at 2 p.m. So Wednesday, I'll be a half an hour late. And then to make up for Monday, I will stream on Friday. So next week, I'm streaming on Wednesday at 2 p.m., and Friday at my normal time at 1:30 p.m. Both Eastern time. Pick the hero. Pick the Bookmap. Let's zoom in on this just a little bit. All right, so it looks like now ES running into some limit sell orders right around 69.45. That is ES 69.45. Limit sell orders. And we'll see if the traders can get enough momentum going to break above those limit sell orders just above. Maybe up to VWAP. Let's go back and check Hero. So if Hero is moving strongly higher, maybe S can break above that level. So far, that does not look like that's the case. I'm going to shift to the total signal. All right, so it is definitely turned down now. Go to equities. Slightly trending higher. So to break through those limit sell orders up above, Hero signal really needs to move up. Back to Bookmap. So far, ES still rejecting at the 69.45 level, with the sellers just up above. All right, last call for questions, comments, stocks. Let's do one last check of NASDAQ. All right, NASDAQ holding pretty flat for the last 30 minutes. All right, we'll watch ES just a minute to see if it can break through these limit sell orders up above. All right, it looked like it was going to try and break up above. And here we go, some more aggressive buyers starting to come in. Might get a stop run up to 69.50. We'll check Hero. All right, Hero turned up. That's good. If it can keep moving up, then ES may break up above. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Everyone, I want to thank you for watching. Remember, the schedule changed next week, and this week, options expiration on Friday, and then we'll talk about that next Wednesday. All right, everyone, have a great afternoon. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your questions, comments, and I will see you next week on Wednesday. Bye.